Alright, so before this world tour video starts, I just want to say thank you to all of you guys for the continued support for the 2 years now that has been up and running here. This is something that, like I said before, if you were here at the start of the series, you would know that this was not originally planned to be a server, but with all the support and stuff like that, we created it as a server and things like that. So this world would not be where it is without you guys. So thank you again for everyone that does that. All the server members on the server that actually make AutoCraft what it is, because it's not just me. Trust me, it is not just me. I'm the only one that makes the videos for this stuff, but there's a lot that you guys, if you're on the Discord and stuff like that, you do know everything that goes on behind the actual YouTube video and things like that. So thank you to those and everybody, of course, that's all YouTube, Twitch, anything like that. If you are any way related to AutoCraft at all, I greatly thank you and appreciate your support. And I hope we continue that for the years to come. Now, that being said, this world tour is slightly scuffed. For the reason my OBS, every time I launch it, decides to default to a audio or a mic, for this matter, device that does not that is not my Blue Yeti, which I use to record with. I did not notice this until near to the very end of the tour, so I will be having to do a voiceover of the actual tour. You can still hear everybody else in the Discord, but for a reason, my OBS decided not to record my audio. So my options are very limited. If I DH one of our special guest here was recorded or was streaming the tour, so I can take the audio from them. Obviously, the audio quality would be a lot less because it's through Discord, and then there is some music in the background there. So what I'm going to do instead is just do a voiceover. It's not going to be great, but I do apologize for that. But this is my really only options to do for this, unfortunately. So you'll see when it kicks back in, of course, it'll feel more natural than me doing a voiceover. But this world tour won't be our best, to say the least, but we do cover the farms and things like that, so you will get to see the farms actually working, which was voted on you guys in the Discord. So yeah, I'll get out of your way. We have a long world tour ahead of us, so let's get into that. Alright, today we have a very special episode of it being the 2-year world tour. This is AutoCraft's 2-year world tour, which is hardly hard to believe that AutoCraft is 2 years old on this day that this video is being posted. So October 9th was the first video back in 2020. That's really hard to say. This series being completely started and all that stuff. Of course, it was started in a single player world, but now has since evolved into a server setting. Firstly, I do want to thank Inventor and DH for participating in this world tour. They are here in us on the Discord here. My Discord overlay is not working today, unfortunately, so we can't see them and everything like that, but they are here, I assure you that. For those that don't know, Inventor and DH here are both server members on the Mechanists server, which will, of course, have a link down in the description down below. A lot of stuff that we will cover today will, of course, be linked in the description down below and things like that. But the top two will be DH and Inventor, followed by Mechanist, and then things like that. For those that don't know, AutoCraft, we are a 117 technical SMP server. Like I did say before, this world did start as a single-player world 6 months before the series on YouTube started to take off. After that, it was open to close people that have supported me since the start, and then has since, at the 1-year world tour, been open to people. As you can see, we have multiple server members now as well. Now, with there being more server members and stuff, we can actually do even crazier projects than I have done before by myself and everything like that. So this allows me to do a lot more stuff on the server like that. A couple of things before we start off. That CS command is available to all of you so that you can get closer and see better projects. That also makes it a little bit easier to go look at some things that could be far away, and we will have spectators that generate chunks. That way we can get close to things and not interfere with stuff like that. I will also be glowing throughout the tour with the arrows, so if you do get lost, you can always just look for the glow in person, or if you want to ask, you can always have one of us TP you to us. That way you can keep you for the tour. This is, of course, is a copy of the world. That way we can obviously do stuff in here we wouldn't really do in the actual survival world. We'll just revert it back to the backup we took before the store. The thing, we will only be covering the projects we completed with after the 18-month tour and to the current time. That is mainly due to everything that already being covered beforehand, which you will of course find the other tours linked in the description down below as well. First thing we're going to cover here is our spawn perimeter. This was of course completed a long time ago, but is still very important to a technical SMP server. Now it may just look like a very empty perimeter, but of course I will assure you there is a beneficial factor to it. For those that don't know, your world, if you're on Java and a vanilla or Fabric server, your spawn is always loaded. The MSVT at the top left there on the middle of my screen, that is our MSVT while idle while having that many players online. Now that is not usually the case for most servers because obviously your spawn is loaded all the time. This, with our spawn, is completely clear, so there is nothing really blocking this at all. There's less stuff for the game to process and everything like that, so the server runs at a lower MSVT, which is overall better performance. The lower the MSVT, the better the performance of the server is. Now we will head to the Nether Hub here and check that out. Alright, so this is Nether Hub. It has not changed much since the previous world tours, of course, besides the addition of new bolts. The only main difference is the, of course, addition of the second floor there, which is accessible by slime launchers and things like that, but everything else has been basically the same. On both ends there, we do have the switches for the mob switches. So one is, of course, for the Nether, and then the north side, of course, is for the overworld then. This allows us to control everything from the one central area, especially the Nether switch that is over 1,000 blocks away, while the overworld one is right next to spawn. This makes use of our chunk loading line here. We do, of course, have one going to the main storage, but this main two are for the mob switches themselves. Now, yes, it is a very, very slow design, but it does allow us to automatically use the system that I created so that upon a server restart, it will automatically turn on the mob switches without any player interaction needed at all. This, of course, is a huge quality of life thing to have, because if we make a backup on the server or you shut the server down for any reason, then this will start that up automatically without anybody needing to go towards the switch or to press the button in the main hub themselves. So yes, of course, these switches were created before the shulker duplication was a thing, so they are weather-based switches. And something I did add for the logic part is that no matter what state the switch is in, it will send the correct signal, either 1 or 2 pulses down that line there, to allow the switch to turn on no matter what. Now there is actually a cool landmark here from when we moved the first switch, which was really close to the hub, which was a dumb decision. But as you can see here, there are some witherheads just completely stuck in the bedrock. It's just a weird landmark that we have, and then never understood how these got there, because all we did was kill the withers that were there. And it may be because my game crashed when I swiped them all with the sword for the last time. Don't still entirely know how it happened, so if someone does know, please let me know in the comments down below. This still makes no sense to me at all. But if we were to keep it, I would like to keep it, and we would get rid of all the bedrock around it and like keep it as a landmark to like show like the weirdness of Minecraft and what it can be, which will of course be connected to the hub at some point if we do choose to do that.
Very odd. I can like see what direction they're facing with like F3B. Very odd.
And we have just a random clock floating in the sky. Gotta love the connection issues from everybody across seas from where the server is located. So
very sus. Oh. Yeah.
Alright, first we will head to the main storage perimeter. This is of course accessed by piston bolts. We use these mainly for the quality of life for longer distance destinations, because you can just get in the minecart, hit a button, and be automatically transported to your destination without needing any input from the player. Now yes, these are not Inspector Talon's demi bolts and things like that. These were obviously created before that was invented and shown off. We don't really plan to upgrade them because obviously there's probably close to 100,000 blocks of blocks travel with piston bolts in this world. So that would take quite a long time to do. And we already have them and they're functional. So it's not really necessary. We still love you, Inspector Talon, but upgrading all our bolts or even doing it for new bolts wouldn't really make sense to me personally because it wouldn't fit in with the rest of the bolts and it would just look really weird. Maybe on the second layer we would do that, but for now we'll keep the regular ones and head to our updated main storage perimeter. You can of course fly the same down the path of the bolt. It is of course faster than the bolt itself, but like I said, it is mainly for the quality of life. Those that may know, this storage perimeter should have been completed a lot earlier than it was. If it was not for Dazi on our server, we would probably have just copied a server's main storage, which of course is not ideal to do, because when you make a storage, you generally want to make it around what your personal or server needs are. Whereas someone's storage they design for a different storage server or things like that are mainly designed for them, not what you are going to use it for, where items are located, what items go into bulk or chest halls, other things you can have like, mass crafters, restock stations, furnace arrays, brewing areas, things like that. All really what you should want to have in a main storage, not what someone else created for you, which is why we always suggest if you can make your own, do that. That way you can make it tailored to yourself and things like that. Of course, we have designs from the Storage Sec Archive Discord for the storage itself. The layout is what Dazi and myself did actually work on for this storage here. Now the main layout of the storage has not changed. It's mainly down to the systems inside the storage itself, that being the bulk and the item unloader array, which we will talk about in a little bit. But our main storage here should have been completed a lot earlier than it actually was. Of course, designing your own main storage does come at a cost of you trying to understand everything that goes on in the main storage, which is a lot. Personally, I don't understand most of it at all, but Dazi does as well. We of course have Andrew's mass crafter here attached to the storage here. It mainly isn't used a lot, but it is very beneficial. Before we had all the AutoCrafters and things like that for the redstone components and everything else we would need it for. We of course have a shadow hall, so you can notice in my hotbar, my rockets and pork chops are not going down at all. The pork chops are the fire hearts, but that's just a texture pack that I have for myself. And that just keeps my restocks, everything like that, all up without me needing to go into a shulker box to get it as well. This is one of my newest AutoCrafters. This is the mass decrafting array. So what this is used for is mainly for redstone blocks to redstone dust, iron blocks to iron ingots, things like that. And it has a speed of up to 1 million per hour with only 27 crafting tables there. Now that is achieved based to the hopper minecarts underneath the tables there. But that speed is honestly quite insane to have. It's not used often, but if we need a lot of redstone dust for pistons, for example, this would be the thing to add. Now we are in 1.17, so these cobwebs could be swapped out for powdered snow, but we haven't really needed to do that at all because it hasn't been used, like I said. All in all, one of the very fun projects to actually design and attach to the main storage for make it that own personality enhancement to the storage for AutoCraft's sake. And we do, of course, have the new unloader array I was talking about here. This is a parallel item unloader array that we attach to here. What this does is allow us to unload multiple different item types at the same time for the main storage, basically giving us the potential to greatly reduce the time it would take to unload all the items we would put into the storage without a lot of stuff like that. So if we need to unload stone, cobblestone, a bunch of concrete boxes from the main storage or from projects, we can just put it back in the main storage much quicker than we usually could with everything else. And then under the chest hall, if we were to get a bulk of a certain item, that would of course go to shulker box loaders. That way we can then put those into the bulk if it has a slot. If not, it goes to the item overflow That way no items are lost in any case. And this is of course all loaded by a chunk load array on the top here. There is one of course for the shadow itself, and then we have the storage components for the actual storage, which are loaded. You can see the crafter and something like that aren't really chunk loaded, because if you are there, you need a player there present anyway, so there's really no need for it. Which is all, of course, if we wanted to make something a little bit better, we would obviously raise this perimeter to a full render distance perimeter. That way we don't, if a player is here, there is less lag on the server, but it's mainly chunk loaded anyway, but that is something we could do. Decoration, of course, is a custom render I had for the server members at the time for the floor there, and just gives it a little bit more personality to AutoCraft itself. And then the walls we have here, the fire heart in the center, and then the orange and yellow theme for AutoCraft itself, which was of course designed by server member Happy. It's a very clean but simple decoration, and very much needed for the server. There is of course the input here for the player, so you have the bulk boxes and the mix boxes, and then loose items go into that shulker box there. Dazzy of course added a lot of lamp indicators for not only himself if anything goes wrong, but for players that do understand. And we have the chunk loading, or the shulker box return there on the side, and then various items or systems on the side for Dazzy to use. Now on each bolt we do have a return on the top here to head back straight to the Nether Hub. This is very convenient because bolts are only one direction usually, and this one allows us to go back from the location that we already traveled to. Back at the hub now, we will head to our next destination, which will be our finished gas perimeter.
Inventor's wearing my head right now.
This is shown based off the decoration for the bolt itself, or the banner on the front of the bolt, which is usually themed to the area that we're going. So you can see this has a gas face on it with a little bit of a blue accent for the Soul Sand Valley, which this perimeter was made in.
Banner idea is pretty good. You can usually it's pretty straight, pretty obvious what they are. And Mechanists, we were doing mostly map arts for them. You can get a little more custom, but it's definitely a lot more things, a lot more work to do, and not really worth it.
Alright, so we are at our finished gas perimeter. This was of course shown off in the 18-month world tour, but we did not have the full project finished. The walls are not all the way to the roof, and as you can see now, we do have the full bedrock roof broken above the actual perimeter itself, which did take a little bit of time. This full breaking of the roof was not needed at all. All you really need to do is break above the farm itself to get the spawn in spaces, like we've done with the gold farm and things like that. But we wanted to break the full bedrock roof here for the decoration to go up a little bit higher, and of course just for that extra wow factor of the perimeter. So of course it is a very simple Y0 portal spend farm, relatively easy to do, but something you can't see here is that the whole floor is glass. That's due to my invisible glass texture pack there, but it still functions the same way. It just gives it a little bit cleaner look for the YouTube videos and things like that. Something you will notice on the farm here is there are some glass blocks on the very outer portals. That is due to some miscommunication within server members that this needed to be chunk aligned for that very reason, so the outer portals don't work. So we just have a couple of glass blocks on top of those to stop the spawning in that area. Not ideal, but it is still functional and still relatively fast for a 2x2 chunk of area for the spawning pad. Now it does use the most optimized layout. That is because we can space the portals out every other 2 blocks. So that gives us the gas that still spawns anywhere in the spawning pad enough room for them to spawn and immediately get transported to the overworld. So because the portal does count as a block in height, if there isn't a portal there, it'll spawn a little bit faster because it is still lower in the world. Because if you don't know, mob spawning starts at the lowest part of the world and works its way up to the highest, is only the lowest block possible. Then of course it's a lot quicker with the successful spawns for the farm itself. It is a very dumbed down version of it, but there are other explanations on YouTube if you would like to see that as well. We will now head to the overworld side, which is on the top here, and show that off before we do start the farm in action. So if we head down here, we have the overworld side, which is of course in another perimeter. This is not even needed at all either, but it does allow us to make this cool castle decoration in the center here, which of course has a gas theme to it. Now, this was actually designed by Happy, one of our server members on the server here. Originally was a desert theme, but is now a soul sand theme.
Yeah, that looks really cool. I like all the like Soul Sand Valley themed blocks.
So we have the quartz, the bones, the soul sand, and everything like that to make it that theme.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really cool building.
I do need to set up the actual farm itself, the TNT looting, so I will do that and then be back. Alright, now that should be the correct arrow position here. We're going to test it out, make sure this is all working before we obviously start the spawning of the ghast again. And there we go. That TNT did get lit, which is what we want. And now we'll go down here. I'll just use myself to this test here. And you'll want to use interval 8, any interval of 8 for this. Now, the pushers did get messed up again, but that's not to worry. That was just to offset them a little bit. So we'll use 80 ticks, which is 4 seconds, which gives the items enough time to go down. And you see we have the ghast spawning back in now.
Burn, that's going to be a little bit of a problem.
And the XP usually just gets split up, but because there's multiple players on the platform, it will go towards the players and get stuck there, unfortunately. But yeah, the farm is fully running now, as you can see. What we do here is we down excel the ghast that come to the portal. It's a bit lowered, that way we get the drops to get funneled into storage there. And then we, of course, attach Comedy's adjustable TNT looting area, so there's not a required limit or required speed of TNT. You can use it for any interval that you would like with a multiple of 8. So you could use the TNT every 800 game picks if you wanted to, but with our speed of the farm, we really can't do that. 80 game picks is probably the highest I would go with this EOL farm that we have. That is just due to the amount of gas that we would then get. We don't want them to die of suffocation damage, of course. And as you can see here, this storage is only built for processing 1 ghast per tick, but as you can see here, with the TNT looting, it is more than the storage can actually handle, unfortunately, but really don't need much gunpowder or gas here. It's really just built for the farm itself, which is still a cooler processing area that we could have done. Now you do see most of the people using player sword looting, or you have the regular suffocation damage that is done for these ghast farms. One is a little bit different, which I think we did achieve with this TNT looting area. Of course, we have AutoCrafting, which does justify to us that we can use the TNT looting because we can supply the player with more TNT than they actually use. So we actually make a profit on TNT as well as a profit on gunpowder. So this, to us, justifies us using the TNT looting, and it's overall a really satisfying thing to watch run for hours on end. Now there is a slight bit of loss with the farm because we didn't down excel them far enough in a sense to where unfortunately some of the items do go back to the nether because if a gas goes through the wrong game tick and the TNT is exploding, it will send the drops and XP back to the nether. But we have tested this farm for numerous days and it has not crashed the server, so nothing to be worried about. It's just a slight loss of inefficiency with the farm, but it's not too big of a deal all in all. So we will now course the farm off, tell my player to stop using the TNT, and then we will head to our next area. Alright, back at the hub, we will now head to our next destination, which you could probably guess is our updated creeper perimeter. This is, of course, another thing that was shown off in the 18-month world tour, but it's not since been finished either until now. So we will get in the piston bolt here and head to the destination, which is about 1,000 blocks away in the nether, so it is quite a distance away in the overworld. Those that don't know, if you travel in the nether, it is 1 block in the nether is 8 blocks in the overworld, so it is kind of like a hyperlink way to travel to a destination that can be quite a distance away in the overworld. Alright, so this is our creeper farm perimeter. Now this is something that is very simple and not really often used, but is a TNT non-looting mob farm for the creepers only. So It is a very simple thing to do, which is why this whole area was completed within less than a week of us starting the project from normal terrain. This was, of course, like I said, shown off in the 18-month world tour, but the main addition here is going to be the AutoCrafter, which we will showcase in a second. But will, of course, run the farm first, which we will need to turn off with the switch in the Nether Hub, which is a lot shorter of a distance to travel than the Nether switch. So this is a farm that was actually used on Waytech, which you may have seen it on. This was by Carb. Everything I do mention here will be linked down in the description down below. There will be a link to the original episode that showcases where this farm was built, and then that video that itself will then have all the links to everything used in the farm, everything like that. Storages, things like that will all be linked in the description down below once we get there. And then, yeah. A couple things to talk about while we wait for the switch to turn off. We have the floor art down here. This was actually the first one of the first ones that I got custom made for AutoCraft itself. This does, of course, cost money, but I think it does add a nice way to kind of theme the area that we are doing it around the mob itself. And that was, of course, a custom art that I had commissioned for an artist to do. And you might not know it based off how well they did, but they are not actually just strictly for Minecraft artists. This is the first time I'm ever hearing about the game itself, and I think they did a very, very good job with the instructions that I gave them. With, you can see the TNT and everything like that flying away from the initial explosion from the creeper to, of course, related to the creeper. We do have a new little Easter egg in the walls here by Happy, where the little Happy creeper, which was part of the April Fool's update for Minecraft, which did do quite a bit ago. So nice little Easter egg thrown into there for the sake of the decoration. It's not noticeable unless you were actually look at the stuff. So the switch down did turn off, so we will go turn the farm on, and we will see the farm in action based off the wave of raining TNT that gets thrown down to the farm. We'll, of course, lower down the block sound so we can actually hear everything. And yeah, so this, of course, is based off the mob spawning in the center there. We do use the trapdoors to limit the height of the creepers so that only creepers can spawn in this area. And it's just really interesting and satisfying to watch the TNT perfectly slide into that 1x1 hole in each of the modules themselves, and then obviously use the TNT to kill the creepers at quite a fast rate. Of course, it is non-looting, so it's just going to be the regular drop from a creeper, which you on average get 1 gunpowder per creeper. So whatever rate you spawn will be the amount of gunpowder you get, which is around 120 to 130,000 we have without a mob switch, without the bat switch and the breaking of the bedrock. Of course, we are not at Y0, which is why this project was done so fast. But you don't need to go down that low with this farm to get such high speeds. And it is very lag efficient on the server as well. Even with all these players in the perimeter and not being, a full render distance perimeter at all. All in all, still a really satisfying farm to watch. Just because of all the delay from the TNT modules themselves. They're not all activated at the same game tick, which makes it a really satisfying farm to watch.
That's a pretty cool farm.
Mm-hmm.
So what we will do now is we will now turn the farm off, turn the switch back on so that we can show off and then explain the crafter that we have on the side here, which is the new addition for this perimeter.
Would it have been worthwhile to break bedrock to get them even lower?
Alright, switch is back on. We will now turn the farm off. And now we will show off the TNT crafter that was added onto the side here. So if you haven't caught on, I do experiment a lot with the AutoCrafters itself, which is used an AutoCrafting table, which is a carpet mod extension, which is then hence where the name AutoCraft sort of comes from. Not entirely, but it does come from that as well. This is a small TNT factory that I did design for this area because we already need a lot of TNT for an upcoming project, because we cannot use duped TNT like this farm does. We need to use the TNT looting, which is a bit different to do. You can't use duped TNT for TNT looting. So we needed a fast way to craft a lot of TNT, which I did spend a little time with and everything like that to do that as well, making a full UI, stuff like that, and like that. This is all thanks to my one-wide tileable TNT crafter. Now, this is something that was a little bit easy to do than you would think, because the TNT recipe itself has a very simple recipe where it alternates between gunpowder sand, gunpowder sand, gunpowder sand, and so on. So you can take advantage of using update order here for this and make the recipe very, very easy to do. I also did include a auto shutoff feature for this crafter since it was so small and easy to do. It made sense for me just to do that built in with the crafter itself. Usually I add those on top of everything like that, but this one I made it within the crafter itself, which makes it a little bit easier to do as well. So we get the output of TNT on these back chests here, which you can see we have crafted roughly 100,000 TNT that's stored here. Not a lot, but it is roughly about an hour of running the crafter at full speed, which it does eat through the gunpowder and sand that you do put in this crafter. It does have a little bit of logic in it, which I do not experiment with a lot, so it is nice to see me doing that, going out of my comfort zone and experimenting with that stuff, because it is something I usually don't do. But it was fun and challenging to design. But is it the best it could possibly be? No. Is it functional? Yes, which is what we really wanted to do. Now we have two inputs on the side here. We have one for sand and one for gunpowder. That is based off the update order, that the direction you build the farm or the crafter itself. So the crafter, technically directional. You can rotate it. It'll work in all directions. The only thing you need to keep in mind is that the update order of the direction you have the factory will matter for the crafter itself. So if you need to switch to sand and gunpowder, you can do that. You'll have to test it out before you build the factory, of course. Now with this distribution line here, we need to have 27 boxes be dispensed at any given point in time, but we also need to have them all lined up in one big clump. That is to take advantage of hopper cooldown, which we will showcase here. So what we do is we obviously send all the boxes up to the main batcher system here, which we needed to design that if it has 27 boxes, it will dispense all 27 boxes, but it will also continue to do that cycle until it runs out of items again, which we then obviously stop the clock. That way every single one of these droppers for the stuff here gets all the same amount of items evenly to each box here. So we see you have all 27 boxes there. They're all clumped up together. And that allows every single shulker box unloader to get exactly one shulker box. Because of hopper cooldown, the hopper can only intake one stack, or in this case, one shulker box per 8 game ticks. So provided we move the item fast enough over the hopper before the 8 game tick cooldown arrives, we can evenly distribute items very, very quickly across all of them without needing the use of the chest minecart or things like that that you would normally use for this area. This would, of course, not work for the Nether, but it does work for us here. And you can see we have nothing at the end there because there is exactly 27 loaders or 27 unloaders, and we dispense 27 boxes. So it is very easy to just not need anything at the end because it just collects all the boxes, and there is never ever a case where there is overflow. And then into the UI here, you do I love my UIs. My UIs I try to make as simple as possible for anybody to understand, that even if they don't have any idea what this thing is for, they should be able to figure it out based off my UI that I designed mainly for that reason. So we have a lot of lamp indicators here and signs explaining what these do. So if the lamp is on the bottom right there or bottom left, that is system is requesting that item based off the side that you have it on. So the right is of course the gunpowder, left is of course for the sand, and in the center there we have the main on-off indicator there. Which is going to be if the crafter is actually crafting items or not. And this crafting is very simple, like I said, because it's based off update order, and the crafter recipe itself for the TNT is very simple because it alternates between gunpowder, sand, and we have a very simple item filter on the bottom there to only allow TNT to flow through. So no matter what is left in the crafter, it'll only take out TNT. It is a very easy way to get around the hopper unlocking part at the bottom. And then we have our output of TNT on the back here, of course, which can hold roughly about 1 million TNT crafted at any given point in time. And the shulker box return on the top there. So why do we build it in the creeper farm area itself? Well, because we have access to the gunpowder right over here, which we can go get very easily and things like that. And then obviously we just need to bring the sand over from the gravity duper to this one area. So we only need to transport one item here, which is very beneficial to do. So this would be the first one. We'll go to the second floor of the Nether Hub, which is accessed by that slime launcher there on either side. And all the player needs to do is just input any WASD or their movement keys, and they will automatically be transported to the second layer of the Nether Hub here, which is access to a bunch more bolts that we have, because some are different direction. So the first ones on the bottom there only go west and east. These ones will then go north and south, giving us a lot more areas to access a lot easier than it would be to go from the bottom part there. Alright, so we now head down to our bee farm area here, and we'll have 3 different areas to show off. This one is the main area, which is the storage part, which is of course a giant bee, because why not? On the left here we have the honey farm, and on the right, yes, we have the honeycomb farm. Now what makes these areas so special is they are of course dug out in the nether. These are not built on the nether roof or anything like that, they were dug out in the regular nether terrain. Now how do we do that? Well, of course, because the bees do not work in the nighttime in the overworld, and in the nether in the end you cannot chunk load anything, unfortunately, so you need a player there present. Despite this, MSPT here at this farm is actually quite lag efficient. That's just because we're loading the bees personally, so there's more for the game to process. And there's around 5,500 bees in this area at any given point in time. We did dig out these areas in very different shapes. This first one is the full farm. Talk about the farm first. This is Experimental Ideas 1728 honeycomb or honey bottle farm here. This is very, very lag efficient despite what we have right now. Anybody that is visiting the server, as you can see, from overseas does have a hard time staying connected in this area because of all the stuff that the game is processing and network connection and things like that. So, fortunately, we don't get to visit this area too much. It is very, very laggy if the player goes to it now that the farm is fully built up, but it does work if we need honey in large quantities and things like that. So, on the right here, we have the complete opposite. We have the honeycomb farm, and they are, of course, dug out in different shapes. You can see on the right here, or left here, we have the honey bottle itself, because this farm obviously does create honey bottles. So we have the area dug out in a honey bottle shape, and of course decorated in a honey bottle decoration there. This does give it a nice clean area from the map POV, which of course what this area was done, but also does look like a honey bottle in-game as well. And we just did some very simple black concrete walls. That way it gives you kind of the illusion that you're just looking at the honeycomb or honey bottle or the bees themselves. Honeycomb 1 is very distinctly a honeycomb. Turned out really amazing. That's because the honeycomb is very simple to do. And of course, all those drops here are transported to the main storage here in the center, which is the giant bee. As you can see, we haven't really run the honey farm too much. We are only running the honeycomb farm right now due to some decoration that is needed for a specific perimeter. Now we do have some AutoCrafters here, which is of course beneficial for us because we obviously don't want to craft these stuff manually if we don't have to quickly. These are of course only one of each crafter here, so it is very slow, but this honey one on the left here is about 1,000 honey blocks per hour, which is pretty good for a honey crafter. Of course it is a bit slower because of the fact you need to take out 6 items in the hopper underneath for each recipe, because the honey recipe itself, you get 4 of the empty bottles back after crafting the honey block that you were crafting originally. Now you're saying, why do we need 6 items if there's only 4 plus 1 for the honey block itself? Well, you of course have a dummy item because the recipe is a 2x2 recipe inside a 3x3 crafting table. If you don't know how auto crafting table works, it's a mod that allows hopper and dropper support for the crafting table itself, that we don't need a player to actually do the crafting themselves. So how it works is it inputs items from the top left to the bottom right in a column fashion. So it's always starts on the left side of the table. So what that means is on the top right for the recipe, we need to put a dummy item there to stop the next honey bottle from going in the wrong spot and things like that. The honeycomb one is a bit of a same, but there is of course no glass bottles that you get at the end of the recipe. So you don't need to wait 48 game ticks for just the one crafted item besides the input, of course, for that So my honeycomb one does craft around 4,000 compared to the 1,000. That's really down to the dummy items that you need to take out for the crafter itself, which we can of course control the farms from the main bee here, so that we don't have to go to any of the farms, provided there isn't any restock needed for shears, bottles, or shulker boxes, things like that.
Alright, so the next farm that we're going to be looking at is the Deepslate AutoCrafting. So it's a custom data pack that basically adds a custom crafting recipe for Deepslate because it's awful to mine, so why would you want to do it manually? And plus, basically, the other option would be running a tunnel bore, which is a lot of work just to get a building block that's basically only used for decoration. So yeah, it's really useful for a lot of different stuff on the server, especially deco, if we want to include Deepslate in anything. Otherwise, it'd be a whole lot of work. Oh. So, if you're not already, you can take the piston bolt. Sorry, I'm trying to focus on flying. So, obviously this isn't vanilla because it's a custom data pack that uses, I believe, cobblestone, blackstone, and what else in the recipe? Alright, so each crafter uses 18,000 of both cobblestone or stone and basalt per hour to allow us to be able to craft enough Deepslate per hour to suit our needs. So the farm gets up to 36,000 per hour for the individual Deepslate crafters. So basically, we need to make more than the crafters will ever use. That way, their backlog of items never runs out. So we have on-site basalt and cobble farms, which just helps a lot with not needing to transport materials back and forth. And then each of those is hooked up to, I believe it's an 8x loader, to allow us to just transport everything more easily and not have a bunch of item streams with a bunch of items floating around in just shulker boxes. So the crafters do have a built-in safety feature where if any of the materials do start to run out, the crafter does get turned off to make sure that nothing goes wrong, which is really great because if for some reason something gets messed up, like the cobble gens break, something like that, they'll stop themselves. Yeah. And yeah, same with input on blackstone. Obviously we can't farm blackstone in the overworld. So if there's no more blackstone, it'll shut itself off. And so the main goal of this whole thing was to make it as lag efficient as possible. That's why it's built in the giant dig site, so that the chunk loaders wouldn't load unnecessary chunks. So it's a full 5x5 around each of the chunk loaders, so that the entity processing and redstone processing chunks are all completely dug out. Which definitely helps with saving on lag, especially if it's just going to be running in the background while someone's doing something else on the server. And so it doesn't have too big of an effect on the health of the server, except for maybe the TNT dropping, but there isn't much you can do about that. And so once all the Deepslate is crafted, if you look at the roof, you can see that it's all put into box displays in the ceiling. And that's just a really nice way. If you need to grab some and then go, you can take that. Or you can just break a box and it'll replace it. Which is very useful if you need like a couple dozen boxes for a project. And yeah, that's the majority of this farm. You can see some of the input. It's on the sides, like shulker boxes at the bottom of the walls. And then blackstone input in the very center.
Alright, so this next area we'll be visiting, there's two different areas we'll be visiting, but this is going to be all part of one project, which will be the Lazy Freight Farm Perimeter. Now, as you can see here, the bottom part for the bedrock break-in is not fully done yet, so that we can get the full circle pattern for a bedrock roof above our circle perimeter that we did hand dig to create this area. Now, this has taken a lot longer than expected because we were using one-way flying machines, and we used a three-way flying machine for the center part, but we're using these one-ways for the outside here. That way we can clear out the rest. I do know we can use the lag bedrock break-in or this bedrock break-in mods. I really don't want to do that. That way we can just say we fully did this with regular bedrock breakers in survival and everything like that. So that is the reason why we haven't finished this project as of now. It has been roughly a month. Granted, we have spent a month breaking the bedrock. We did have to dig out the whole area underneath first, which is cleaning out all the lava and things like that. But for those that don't know, this is Garlic Bread's lazy raid farm. This is, of course, just the nether side processing part of this. Then you have to go to the overworld side, which is in a full perimeter as well. This is just the processing part for the farm itself. Now, it does, of course, use TNT looting, so we have to craft the TNT manually, which is part of the creeper perimeter that we did add there. Brett does explain this in a bit more detail than I would be able to, so there will be a link, of course, to his video down in the description down below. But there was not a storage attached to this or a collection for that matter, so what I did is I attached a storage part for here with the AutoCraft in. Of course, we wanted to craft the redstone blocks just to increase our storage capacity for that and the glowstone as well. So you can see up here we have the TNT looting here. We did have to get tile entity list block 36s, which is where you see those arrows bouncing off of right there. Basically just allows them to stay there in a sense. I don't fully understand it, but those arrows wouldn't be able to stay there and bounce like that without that tile entity list block 36 supporting the gravity blocks on top. So down below, as you can see, I have the auto crafting area. I have a one wide tileable redstone block crafter, and then we have 4 of those. Then we have 3 of the glowstone block crafters for the glowstone. And then the final part down there is going to be the shulker box loaders for the gunpowder. Obviously, we have no sand here, so we can't automatically craft the sand. But that will all get transported back to the main player UI, which I did create as well. And everything like that. And then we have the TNT conveyors, of course, because you need to be in lazy chunks for this farm to work. Hence the name Lazy Raid. So it uses that as well. So we'll head over to the nether processing side, and then we'll head to the overworld part. We just use the chunk loading portals here for the player access as well, like that. And we'll use some other things for the right and left one. The main center one I did keep open for the player to access. And else you have to fly over a couple thousand blocks in the overworld with the player portal at the main UI. So on the overworld side is where the main decoration starts to take place. That is fully finished. Of course, we have the farm itself in the center here. Now, it may not look hard at all, but it is really hard to get these update suppress portals in survival, of course. In creative, of course, you can just replace the portal itself and then not update anything, but for us, of course, this has to be done in 100% survival, nothing like that. It would have taken a lot longer if we didn't have a cheat code called Dazi on the server. Dazi is one of our grinders that does everything and finished this area within a couple days for the farm. The farm was done within, I think, 2 days, wow. Which was honestly quite insane to think about for all the suppression and everything like that needed to be done for both the nether side and the overworld side. We finished all that in roughly 2 days. And of course we have the floor decoration here, which was one of the most expensive ones I had to do because of all the character models themselves. But I think it is amazing for what it does. The Ravager looks absolutely picture perfect in a sense to the game. Of course, this was built for a map, so there is a better image there. For that, if I do get the picture, I will show it here. But other than that, all the stuff here is perfectly fixed for the farm. And then we have some very simple wall decoration here. That reflector made for the perimeter here is very simple, but does fit the raid farm theme, of course. This is a full render distance perimeter, so it is stretched across 532 blocks, which is very slightly 4 times the amount of a regular perimeter is that we have on the server. So decoration on this scale takes quite a long time. compared to anything else. So this is where all the Deepslate went. So you can see in the wall there we have the Deepslate, polished Deepslate, and then the Deepslate bricks. So that is where we needed the Deepslate for to get that sort of gray color that we were aiming to get, which is where those millions of, probably 100,000s of Deepslate did go into for this perimeter. As you can see on the right and left side here for the portals, there is these minecart stations and things like that to transport the players a little bit more automatically. That way we can do that without needing to go to each individual spot with the player themselves. This is mainly down to we need to spawn the player in the nether side first and then transfer them to the overworld side. So this makes this a little bit easier for us to do. We push them through the portal, hit a no block, and they get transported to their desired location. For each player, there's 3 on the south and 3 on the north. Depending if you were to use this farm at half speed, you only need the 3 on the south, not the 3 on the north. But of course, we're going to run it at full speed, so we need 3 on the south and 3 on the north. With this system right here, what we do is when the first one comes down, that lands on the top track there. Once we hit the note block again, it'll retract the first one. The bottom one will be the first one it would hit, so then it goes to the second one there, and the same for the bottom one, the very bottom for the third. And then once you hit all 3, then it'll reset itself, ready for the next time you were to run the farm. This was not included with the farm itself. This was a system that we designed for our use case. It's semi-automatic, but it does function for the farm.
I'm sure this will be great on the frames too.
It's actually not terrible on the frames because it's all with the storage in the lazy chunks.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. Duh.
So what I'm going to do now is spawn all the players, and then we'll get this farm fully operational. This will take away some time, so I will be back once this is fully done. Alright, so we have all the players in place, including the TNT bot, and 3 of the bots on each side. Of course, we did give the players battlement just for the sake of the showcase here. We're going to get a little bit closer here in CS. We did turn off spectators generate chunks. That way we can get closer and still show it off without actually generating new chunks. So the player here will go in CS, and then in a few minutes we should see some Ravengers and everything like that start to appear for the farm to fully operate. It does take a little bit to warm up because it is spawning the raids, of course. It needs to shift them over. Brett has a really detailed explanation video, which I suggest you go doing. But as you can see here, we are starting to see some of the Ravagers come through. And because they are not in the lazy chunks, they are outside, they are immediately despawning, which drastically helps with the server MSPT that the farm would actually run at. So sooner we should start to see some of the mobs coming in. As you can see by the entity count on the left there, we are getting roughly 300 to 400 mobs at any given point in time. In the side here, we are a little bit too far away, so we can't see it as of right now, but you can start to see the Ravengers come through at a drastically fast rate. That is due to the stacking part of the raid farm. We will get a little bit closer here momentarily to show that off. I was a little bit too far away, the initial part, but it is one of the most satisfying farms to watch. As you can see, just even the Ravagers despawning and stuff is really satisfying to watch. You can start to see the redstone starting to flash for the detector rails there. And now we get a little bit closer, we can start to see that we have the mobs coming in. Unfortunately, I don't know what this was, but we were only getting one side of the farm to work. We have both of them.
It's quite a survival site.
Yes, it's definitely a survival site you don't really see too often. That's of course because this is of course processed in lazy chunks, so you wouldn't really actually see this in the game at all.
Yeah, it seems like south sides, nothing's coming out of them.
But this has run at full speed before. I'm going to try to give the bad omen to the raid bot again, just to see what it does. But if we didn't get it to work, unfortunately, so we only ran in at half speed. So we only got around 35,000, 36,000 redstone dust per hour, which is still quite faster than most raid farms. Then again, this isn't really meant to only run at half speed, but you could do it. You can see we have to get the first initial raid to come through, but then nothing else afterwards. So that could be something to do with the shifting of the raid farm. We will probably have to troubleshoot that and run the farm again to make sure it's all good. But we will, of course, run this farm for quite some time, provided we have the TNT to supply it, because we need a lot of pistons very, very, very soon. But still, even just in half speed on the right side, watching the farm is one of the most satisfying things that I have personally seen in game. This is one of the farms you actually wouldn't really see in survival because it's not really survival friendly. That's mainly down to all the suppression and things like that you need to do for the farm, let alone all of the TNT that you would have to use for the farm. Because it only generates 75,000 gunpowder per hour, it doesn't fully sustain itself in the TNT department. So you do actually lose gunpowder if you were to run this farm. But we didn't really build it for the gunpowder.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We built it for the redstone itself. So we do take the loss on the gunpowder, but obviously gunpowder is renewable with the creeper farm. So we then just crafted TNT like that and stuff like that. But all in all, we built this for the redstone, not anything else. So that's what this farm is for. And we have the fastest raid farm as of now in the game. You can see me trying to give the bad omen again to the south side, but it's just not working today. So unfortunately, we couldn't see the farm fully run in action, but for the raid farm itself, that video, which will be soon to come, we will of course show the farm fully working at max speed here. All in all, still a very satisfying farm to watch, like I've said multiple times today, but this farm is something special to us because we will use it quite a bit just for the redstone itself. See the overworld side in action. You can see the players that got transported to the location via those rail lines there. The other raids on the north side were perfectly fine, but on the south side we are getting nothing besides the one victory for the initial bad omen. Still don't know what that is down to, but these high-level farms do tend to be finicky at times, but we will definitely take a look at it. This is, of course, a copy, so we can always test it out here and then make sure it's all good. But for now, this isn't working as intended, but the farm is still ridiculous. Ridiculous in a good way, because it is absolutely insane and should not be possible, but then again, it is. But we will head on to the next project here and turn this farm off, of course, before we leave the area, because this will break it if we don't turn it off. Alright, for the second to last project we will be seeing today, we will be going to something that was very special to me at this point in time, no pun intended, but this will be my 1,000 subscriber Piston Factory that I did for my channel. This is when I hit 1,000 subs. I created this factory for the version 3 of my piston crafter and things like that, and everything like that. At the bottom here, this is the slime, so you don't actually die, unlike the Deepslate one.
Yeah, at least there's like a deco around it. Something.
But yeah, as you go to the overworld side here, we have the portal and things like that. So I actually will go get some cobblestone to turn on core 1 there. That way we can at least show one of the cores working today. Other ones need other stuff, so we're not going to be able to do that right now. But we'll at least get one core operational with this cobblestone farm we have on the outside here.
Is that something you'll like hook up so that it'll autofill?
We could do that, but it might be for a different version of the factory. This one, not really designed to do that in a sense. V4 will be a huge step up from V3, that's is for sure. But put this cobblestone in. What we're going to do, put it all in this here. We're going to go get a bunch of cobblestone for it. The factory, at least. I will be back once that is done. Alright, so we have enough cobblestone to at least bring the factory on for this core. We're going to do here, this factory makes use of my new one-wide tileable piston crafter, which should not really be possible, but it is thanks to how we batch the items and things like that. This one is, of course, AB tileable because of the slime and honey, but is still one-wide tileable because it all needs to change just to slime and honey. Yeah. So this core, we're going to select the core for the UI, and then we'll input the items here by unlocking the hoppers underneath. This will start the dispensing and distribution aspect of the factory for that core. Because we only selected that one core, all the input items will only be transported to that individual core, which is, of course, in this case, core 1. If you have multiple cores, for example, it will then split them evenly between those 2, 3, or 4 cores. There's a slight issue with 3 cores because it batches them in series of 4. So then one of the 3 cores would then get an extra bit of items, which is obviously, of course, not ideal. You can see them going into the batcher here. Why do we batch them in batches of 4? Because if there is 4 cores active at any given point in time, then we would, of course, need 4 items to go in different spots. So you can see here, core 1 did turn on. I do have a bit of explanation here, of course, in the video for this farm. If you want to see that, of course, we link in the description down below. This singular core with only 27 crafters crafts about 36,000 pistons per hour. That is, of course, in a much smaller area than my first factory. This is over half the speed of my first factory, and probably a tenth of the size, which is just absolutely insane to think about in terms of footprint on, the length of the factory. And that's just one singular core. So as you can see here, the crafter is working at its max speed. This is, of course, the singular core for this, so the 36,000 pistons per hour, which is still plenty for most people. I don't have a single core design of this, but you can, of course, use the factory in single core mode. You can always just build up one core and just take out the selector panel for all the other cores and stuff like that, but I don't have a singular core, unfortunately, designed for this. May come soon in time. Not something I plan to do as of right now, especially for the V4 that is coming very, very close to being completed. With one core on the server running, we can run this in the background very, very easily thanks to the chunk loaders up top. And we don't need a player here. It's very, very, for us with all the performance mods we have on the server, it's not really noticeable at all, the lag on the server. It's very minimal, just like the Deepslate factory. With all 4 cores, there's a slight difference in the MSVT, but that's not really too big of a deal for us. We need to craft 144,000 pistons per hour, which this core's max speed does, in fact, actually be. This factory's enhancements are down to the UI and everything like that. Of course, the crafter being one by tileable does help with the space efficiency a lot, because you can fit 9 of these in the same space you could fit 3 of my other factories, my other crafters, I mean. Another main difference is the core will only turn on if the core is selected in the UI and all the materials are met the buffer amount for the core. So you can see I click core 2 here, it won't turn on because the material one on the top there is missing an item. So that could be anything from any of the unloaders. So any of the spruce planks, iron ingots, redstone dust, and the cobblestone. If even a singular shulker box unloader in that core is missing a item type of any kind, the core will stay off no matter what the player does in the UI to try to turn it on. This is to prevent the recipe failure, because in a one-wide title situation, clearing that out would be an absolute nightmare, because this crafter doesn't really have an accessible way to clear it. So this is another safety feature added within the crafter or the factory itself. And of course, it is the same for all cores. They have indicator lamps to relate to the player very easily what is missing in that specific core, so they could get that and then put it into that core as well. And then the UI, of course, is hopper locked, and we can have a box sorter in the back here. That way we can only input, let's say, spruce planks, redstone dust, iron ingots, and cobblestone into the factory. That way there is no chance of it running out or breaking the factory with a misinput item. For example, a firework box or things you carry around all the time. You could accidentally misinput it into the system here, and that could break it.
Oh no. So it's not going to be as good a quality, but I do have all my streams recorded. So, and I can send you it after this is over.
So yeah, back to the UI. The main input here will only accept boxes of redstone dust, iron ingots, cobblestone, and spruce planks. That way, if you input anything else into the factory, it will not break the whole factory, which is what you want to avoid, of course, for this large scale. And it will also return the box to you completely filled back up to its original fill level, of course, because it takes one item out to sort the item, to sort the boxes, making use of this box sorter here. But of course, it will obviously then fill it back up, so you don't lose that one item. If you were to input, let's say, a rocket box or a different boxes like it's supposed to be put into the factory itself. There's also a mass decrafter here by Command Leo. That way we can bring over large chunks of, spruce logs, redstone blocks, or iron blocks over here. That way we can just mass decraft those into those required materials for the actual farm of the crafter itself. And then, of course, we have a small sticky piston crafter attached to the factory as well. This is not the speed of the actual factory. This is just made for a convenience factor for it. Because, of course, making around 144,000 sticky pistons per hour would greatly increase the size of the factory. I didn't want to go any bigger than the actual pistons themselves for it. Because that's what you would actually use this area for is regular pistons, not sticky pistons, because for bedrock break-in, you can do it with sticky pistons, but it doesn't make it the most sense to actually do it with them because you require slime on top of it. And regular pistons do the job just perfectly fine. But yeah, that's version 3 of my Piston Factory. I do plan to make a version 4 sometime soon. Don't have an ETA when that's going to be done, but of course everything will take time. And then of course your crafted pistons are then transported up to the UI and have an initial box display, plus access to the bulk if you were to need a large quantity of shulker boxes, which we will use for bedrock break-in very, very soon. This one is our crop farm perimeter. The decoration definitely makes this area a lot better than it normally would be. It's just basically a bunch of crop farms scattered in a perimeter. But the decoration that we have here, that was made by Reflector and I believe Tox on the server here, definitely adds a lot more and makes this area a lot more special than it should be. It's just a bunch of crop farms. But yeah, the main goal of this perimeter was to obviously include a lot of crop farms that are widely used within the game. And to do that without using any bone meal and things like that. We also wanted them to not have any, or for most of them to have an on-off switch. That way we could only turn on the ones that we actually want to use at the point in time. So all of them besides the cactus farm have an on-off switch in some sort of way. So as you can see, if you go to the top here, we have a pumpkin farm. We have a nano wheat farm that I created, which is very over-engineered. It has box unloaders for bone meal, box loaders for everything else, and a complete UI, which is completely overkill for a nano farm, but was a fun thing to actually design and make it overkill as possible in a sense. Then we have the cocoa bean farm, which was actually a really interesting design, making use of a minecart and the hitbox of the fully grown cocoa beans to detect if the cocoa bean is fully grown or not. And that way you only harvest the ones that are fully grown to maximize your output for cocoa beans. A very interesting farm and obviously used for a lot for brown dye. Next we have the sugarcane farm, which is of course completely stupid because it uses a piston and everything per sugarcane. So I really only want a design I could completely turn off, which this design was, and it creates not a lot more than we need to, of course, but mainly, of course, used for rockets. Then we have the bamboo and kelp ones, just so that we can have them, and we can use these both for a bunch of fuel if needed. On the side, we have the melon farm here, and then we have the sea pickle farm, as well as the final one, which is the chorus flower and fruit farm, next to the cactus farm. Something really interesting about the pumpkin and melon farms is they use a flying machine, but there is no hopper minecarts. So it's a very unique design and a very lag efficient design because there is not a lot of entities for it. Of course, you get all the entities when you actually harvest the farm, but it makes use of water streams to transport the items instead of, hopper minecarts or things like that to do that. It's a very cool design and very simple to build, which is also a key factor in building it. But yeah, this decoration, of course, the floor is actually an art that Fred made for us. We like to call it the elemental heart because it has air, earth, water, and fire. If you know where that comes from, it's Avatar: The Last Airbender. That comes from that. And because we already have the fire heart, I think it fits really well to kind of with the crop farm, because you have, the earth and everything like that, water, fire, all that kind of stuff in this area. And then, of course, the walls. They're giant pumpkins, sugarcane, melons, bamboo, and wheat all in one area. Creates a very aesthetically pleasing perimeter to look at with everything all in it. But yeah, very simple perimeter, is greatly improved by the decoration that was created by the members here. Or else it'd just be a bunch of farms scattered within a perimeter scale. Now, was a perimeter needed for this farms? No, not at all. Was it worth it? Yes. Decoration is something we are trying to step up for the AutoCraft server, and not just focusing on the farms. We are actually trying to focus on the decoration as well as the farm, which of course takes longer to do because it's a lot more stuff to take into consideration rather than just the farm. And then all of the drops are then transported to this main central UI in a sense, where they all stored. And there is also the switches on 5 of these to go to all the farms on the left side. The right ones do not work because the farms on that side don't really need any on and off switch compared to the ones on the left side, which you can then control from here. All in all, a very interesting project that you don't really see happen too often on other servers, which is something we try to do on AutoCraft here. All right, we'll go back to spawn, and then that's basically everything that we've completed for this 2-year world tour.
The decoration's very nice.
Yeah, I love how it turned out. Tox and Reflector, I believe we're doing that. We really only have Happy, Tox, and Reflector for decorations, really. So those 3 have been carrying the server. And they're very, I guess you could say, survival friendly. I know you guys do have, like a rail and stuff on Mecha, which do amazing decorations, but building those, holy hell, that was fun.
Yeah, some of those are hard to build, to say the least.
Yes, that's for sure.
I don't know if you've seen the Blaze Overworld deco that needs to be built yet.
I think I saw some early developments of it. Yeah,
crazy.
I saw some early stuff before. Obviously, not a trial anymore, but that. Oof. Still can't believe the audio.
I went to a portal at the very edge.
It's the same portal, but for whatever reason, it links to that location.
Oh, interesting.
I don't understand it.
That seems quite far for it to have linked all the way out there.
It is.
Interesting.
I'm the same thing. Like this portal should link right to the main hub. This portal links to the hub, but then going to that portal only links to that one spot over there. I don't get it.
And like even if you remove the portal, it'll.
Correct.
You can't come back here?
Nope.
That's so odd.
All right. So that's everything we completed within the 6 months after the 18-month world tour. Special thank you to DH and Adventure that were here for the tour. They will have a link to each. You post on YouTube, DH?
I do not post on YouTube, but I do stream occasionally on Twitch.
Gotcha. We'll put that in the description for DH. And then, of course, there'll be a link to Mecha because they are both a part of that as their main server. I know Inventory is also on Mecha now, or WaveTech as well, too. But we will link Mecha because really where I usually met both of these two back in the day. And all the other members that were here for the tour as well, Dazi, Fred, Henrik, everybody else that did leave before the tour ended. Appreciate you guys all hanging out and exploring the tour with us as well. But yeah. If you like to check out some more Minecraft content, I will, of course, be still posting my regular episodes on YouTube. And then DH will also be streaming some stuff for Mecha as well, I would assume. And yeah, something that I also will bring up is I will more than likely be posting every other week now, not every week. With working full time and these projects getting more and more detailed and bigger and larger, it has taken quite a while to finish all these projects. So we will be moving to that for my YouTube schedule. I know it's not ideal, but if I do get extremely far ahead, I will post extra content, but it's highly unlikely at this time because all the projects we are doing are immensely larger than when we first started. So I appreciate you guys singing with me and everything like that. But also, the main thing you guys are all asking about, our applications will now finally be back open. These will be for everybody. Again, if you already applied, you will be able to reapply. and everything like that. So we are really mainly looking for decorators and grinders, but anybody can apply. There's no limits or requirements for you to be skilled in Minecraft, things like that. Open to everybody, but we obviously have an age limit that we will like you to be at, and that's just for obviously TOS reasons, things like that. I appreciate everybody handing out the tour. So members, special guests, anything like that. And I will see you guys all in the next episode.